What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my first impressions of the BLU Bold N2. Now this phone is one of the newer, higher end phones BLU offers, and I can already tell just by the design alone, the phone is at least going to be cool if nothing else. Now if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description as I drop them, so definitely check that out because by the time you're watching this, I'm probably going to have at least a few more out. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we get into the actual phone itself, I want to take a look at what comes in the box because knowing BLU, they really tend to pack these things. So besides the phone itself, of course, we got a wall adapter here, a USB-C cord. Here we got a pair of USB-C headphones, as well as a USB-C to 3.5mm adapter. Now this is one thing I do want to point out right away. The phone itself, as you can see here, doesn't have a headphone jack, and normally, since a lot of people use wired headphones, I would see this as a huge disadvantage, but we're actually getting a full-on adapter here, as well as a pair of headphones that are compatible. So although I'm still not thrilled about a mid-range phone not having a headphone jack, it's still nice that at least they give us the tools to make up for it. Then we got a quick start guide, SIM card installation instructions, and of course a SIM card removal tool. We got a sticker here, and then finally a case. Now keep in mind this is more of a starter case, it's not really the best quality, but seeing as the majority of phones don't come with cases, it's definitely nice that we at least get this. So as you can see there, again, BLU really does pack their boxes full of accessories. I'm guessing it's mostly to make up for not being the most popular brand out there, but all the same, it is some nice stuff to have. Now moving on to the phone itself, with the BLU Bold N2, we're getting a 6.6-inch AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 390, an aspect ratio of 19.5 by 9, and a 90.9% screen to body ratio. So compared to the average BLU phone out there, the Bold N2 has a really nice looking display. I was especially surprised to see that this phone has an AMOLED display. That's not something I think I've ever seen in a BLU phone before. I may be wrong, but I don't think the F91 5G had that either. So that's definitely a nice thing. The AMOLED display is going to give you much brighter, better looking colors, and the viewing angles are also going to be really good. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, the phone's going to be a lot easier to see than something like an IPS LCD display. And of course, with a 1080p resolution, we're going to get a nice crisp image as well. So overall, if you're looking for a mid-range phone with a good display, this phone is going to be a great option, and in general, I am really happy with how things look on here. Now this phone's getting 256GB of internal storage with no microSD card expansion, unfortunately, but again, 256GB is a lot of space, so unless you have really a bunch of things on your phone, if you're really a power user, then this might be a drawback for you. But again, for the average user, I feel like you're probably not going to need more than this. I personally haven't ever used a microSD card on my phone before, and my phone personally only has 128GB. Now I'm not saying I'm the biggest power user out there, but again, in my personal experience, I haven't ever had any storage issues, and with 256GB of internal storage, again, I feel like this is going to be perfectly fine for most people. Now for security features, this phone does have a pretty nice looking in-display fingerprint scanner, gives the phone a nice premium touch, and I do think that's exactly what BLU was going for here. So as you can see, it works really well, and then this phone also does have face unlock, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, in the front here, we got a 16 megapixel front-facing camera. It kind of reminds me of the Samsung Galaxy S10. I do really like the look. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So definitely a real nice camera setup here. As far as features go, this phone has pretty much everything. So if you're taking a lot of photos and you want a wider variety of features, this is definitely going to be a great choice for you. Now I haven't actually used the camera yet, so I can't really comment on the quality, but with the 64 megapixel camera for a phone in this price range, and just going off other BLU phones I've used like the F91 5G for example, I'm assuming the photo quality is going to be really good. But definitely stay tuned for my review and my camera review because I will be taking a lot of test photos for those. Another thing to know about the camera setup is that for video, this phone can record in up to 2K in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. Now I'm not a huge fan of this. 2K isn't really that useful. I feel like if you're going to be recording in a higher quality, you might as well just go to 4K, but I guess at least it's nice that we get a decent quality here. If you're really recording a lot of videos and you want the ability to record in a higher resolution, I personally would just go for a device that can record in 4K. But for the average user, if you're doing something for social media, for example, usually on those platforms, things are going to be compressed anyway, so it doesn't really matter a whole lot. But again, if you're doing something like YouTube, vlogging, that kind of stuff, I would recommend considering a device that can record in 4K. Now, as far as RAM and processor go, with this phone, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. And keep in mind, despite not being mentioned in the name, this phone is a 5G phone, so if you want 5G connectivity, connectivity, it is a good option. Now I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 586 and a multi-core score of 1685. Now if you're not too familiar with this test, this might not mean a whole lot to you, so I do recommend running it on your current device and then comparing your scores to these to see whether or not this phone would be an upgrade for you, because depending on what you have, it may or may not be. If you have a really entry-level phone or maybe a non-5G phone for example, this phone probably will be a decent upgrade, but if you're coming from something like a Samsung Galaxy A52 5G, then it's going to be a completely different story. But in general, as far as performance goes, I really haven't done a whole lot with this phone yet, but from my limited experience doing stuff like web browsing, social media, and just navigating through the phone in general, things have run pretty smoothly and I haven't had any performance issues. Now for the battery, we're getting a 4200 mAh battery that supports 30 watt fast charging, so as far as the battery size goes, it's not the worst, but it's also not the best, especially considering a lot of other phones in this price range have 5000 mAh batteries. So if battery life and longevity is like your number one concern, then I probably wouldn't recommend this phone just because you can do better for the money, but at the same time a 4200 mAh battery really isn't bad, so I would say with this phone you can expect the battery life to be decent. Now the real impressive thing here is the 30 watt fast charging, because while it's still not the best fast charging out there, for a phone in this price range it is really good. So if you are in a situation where you don't have a whole lot of time to charge your phone, this definitely will make a difference. Now unfortunately this phone doesn't have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, then definitely keep this in mind because you're probably going to want to go for a different device that does have NFC in that case. As far as software goes, this phone does have Android 11, which is really too bad because Android 13 is right around the corner, and as far as updates go with Blue phones, I wouldn't really expect to get any major updates. Now I could be wrong, maybe it might happen, but in general, compared to phones like Samsung's that have 5 years of software support, if you're really concerned with getting the latest version of Android as it comes out, a Blue phone is probably not going to be your best option. But despite this, Android 11 still isn't a bad software, and it does run really well on this phone, so if you don't really care about having the newest software, then of course this is not going to be an issue for you. But now that we've gone over some of the specs and features, let's take a closer look at the phone itself. So like I said before, I really like the design of this phone. It looks real nice and modern and definitely has a premium feel. In a way, the overall design kind of reminds me of the Samsung Galaxy S10, which I actually used to have, and I really like that phone a lot, so that's definitely a nice throwback there. We got nothing on the left side, but I will say the phone has a really slim design, so if you want something that's not too bulky, then you're really gonna like this. On the right, we got our power key, volume down, volume up. On the top of the phone, we got the noise cancelling microphone. On the bottom, we got the slot for the SIM card, microphone, USB-C port, and the speaker. Again, this phone doesn't have a headphone jack, which is a bit of a disappointment, but again, at least it does come with a pair of USB-C headphones and an adapter, so even if you do have wired headphones, as long as you don't lose that adapter, it should be perfectly fine. Then on the back here, we got our camera setup, which does look pretty cool, and we got Bold N2 branding right here. The back has this kind of leathery material. Now, I'm pretty sure it's not actually leather, but it feels really cool and unique. Definitely not something you see every day. So in general, I am a big fan of this phone's design. It doesn't really have a lot of weight to it, but it also feels really solid and sturdy, and it does look really premium as well. But in conclusion, my final thoughts about the Bold N2. From my limited experience so far, I do think this is actually a really good phone. From what I can tell, it has great performance, a really good camera setup, the display looks super nice, and the design itself is unique, modern, and premium. So if you're looking for an affordable 5G phone with great performance, a good camera that has a lot of features, a nice looking display, and a cool, unique design, then from my first impressions, the BLU Bold N2 does seem like a really good option. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it as they come out, as well as some information about pricing and availability, so definitely check that out in the description. But otherwise, this concludes my first look at the BLU Bold N2. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Khalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.